Hey folks, this is Kelani. With classic World of Warcraft literally just around the corner, I keep getting the same question over and over again. Whether it's from guildies or just random comments on the few classic videos I've done, one question just keeps popping up. Should I play classic World of Warcraft? Yes you should. Alright, it's probably not quite that easy for a lot of players, and it is a loaded question for sure. There's a lot to consider, but luckily, that's why I'm here. In this video, I want to go over a few reasons why you should play Classic World of Warcraft, but also a few reasons why you might not want to play Classic World of Warcraft. It's all going to depend on a handful of topics and what you personally think and feel. So, why don't we get started? Let's start with the shouldn'ts. Why shouldn't you play World of Warcraft? That might seem a bit backwards, but if any of these factors is a major deal breaker for you, then that's probably the fastest way to answer the question. I would say you shouldn't play Classic World of Warcraft if you don't enjoy the journey. If this is all about the end game for you, kind of like how retail WoW plays, then Classic might not be a great fit. Honestly, no one is going to reach that end game within the first week. Even the most dedicated players will take about that to reach level 60, maybe even a bit longer. If you're someone who doesn't have a lot of time to pump into Classic World of Warcraft, the end game could be months away. So you better enjoy the leveling experience and the journey to level 60 just as much as the stuff you're going to be doing at level 60. It's a very different adventure when compared to the one we have in retail WoW 2. You can't blast your way through mountains of mobs all at once, you're going to have to take things slow, whether you like it or not. Sure, you can start pulling several mobs at once when you have a few party members, but with the distinct lack of AoE abilities early on, you're still taking down one mob at a time for the most part. The good news is that you'll have plenty of opportunities to make some friends along the way, whether it's grouping up for general questing, grouping up for some of the elite or harder quests in certain areas, grouping up to tackle a dungeon or two when you get to the appropriate level, or just grouping up for safety against the opposite faction while moving from place to place. Playing as a group is definitely going to be key for a good chunk of players going into Classic WoW, and those old or new friends can help make the journey so much more enjoyable. But I know there's a lot of folks out there who just can't stand leveling, or think Classic is just going to take too long to level up. If they could get to 60 faster, they might consider playing Classic more, but the journey to 60 is a huge part of the game. If you're not going to enjoy it, you might not really enjoy Classic at all. You also probably shouldn't play Classic WoW if you like complex gameplay. Now, most classes in retail aren't exactly complex, I don't think that's the word I would really use, but you should know what you're getting into with Classic WoW. Yes, a good number of classes might actually have more abilities in Classic than they do right now on live servers, but there's a lot of fluff in there. Don't get me wrong, the fluff was actually really fun and gave you a good sense of class fantasy, but your actual rotation is going to consist of 3 or 4 buttons, and that's if you're playing something complex in Classic. Some casters are literally one button rotations, so if you're looking for something that mirrors live WoW with abilities that interact with each other, having access to several cooldowns and all that jazz, you're probably not going to enjoy the rotations in Classic. It does depend on what you play. Some are significantly simpler when compared to some others, but for the most part everything is going to be easier to play when compared to classes on live. It's not just the classes though, it's also every PvE encounter in the entire game. You're not going to come anywhere close to something like a raid encounter for Battle for Azeroth. Some bosses only have one major ability, and most raid bosses in Classic WoW are going to have less abilities and mechanics when compared to a dungeon boss in Battle for Azeroth. Encounter design was just so different back then, and they're staying as true to vanilla as possible, so all of the same simple designs will be in Classic. I am super interested to see how quickly some raid bosses will go down, because just in its entirety as a community right now, we are so much better as players when compared to the good old days. We can spin 5 plates, juggle a couple of balls and still knock out some decent DPS. We've had fights like Jaina, Archimonde, even some Mists of Pandaria raids are far more complex when compared to Classic. The real difficulty in Classic PvE comes from numbers, not mechanics. So you're going to have to play your class well and pump out a good amount of DPS for what gear you have, but it's not necessarily necessarily going to be all too challenging when it comes down to rotations and encounter design. You also shouldn't play Classic WoW if you don't want to farm. This is a pretty big deal for a lot of players, and I know quite a few of my guildies have expressed concern over the amount of farming and grinding that is essentially required in Classic WoW. On the other side, so many players are super stoked and majorly hyped to get into the farming, so much so that they're planning it all out before we can even get into the game. Some of my guildies have their leveling path laid out. They know when they're going to split off and start farming for their epic mount, what they're going to farm, what professions they're going to use, what dungeons they need to run, everything. They're dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and they couldn't be happier that Classic is releasing in 2 weeks. So obviously, if that kind of stuff excites you, Classic has the potential to be an amazing experience for you. But if you don't like farming, you could end up getting quite frustrated. Farming is required for pretty much everything in Classic WoW. You have to put in the hours if you want the rewards. That's how the game worked back then. There aren't really any shortcuts. No tokens to buy for gold, no freebies handed out to you, no experience bonuses like heirlooms. You get the idea. Everything is off your own back, and you have to farm for it. Another big reason why a lot of people probably shouldn't play Classic World of Warcraft is the lack of convenience. Over the years, Blizzard has introduced many changes to our beloved game. Some of them have been good, some of them have been, let's just say, not as good. Some new systems and features traded away various other attributes for convenience, whether that be community interaction, server reputation, meaningful rewards, or a handful of other trade-offs. We always gave up something for a new system. It didn't come free. At the end of the day, convenience is just so convenient. The Dungeon Finder allows you to sign up for a queue, fart around in whatever city or location you want, and get randomly matched with some strangers who hopefully know what they're doing. You can make your way through this dungeon with these strangers without having to say a single word, and hopefully you come out on top in the end. Maybe the group fails and people end up leaving, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because you can just hit up that queue again and stand around for another 10 minutes. Looking for raid is more of the same thing except for the content that's supposed to be difficult. You can hop into a random group of players and hope for the best, but at least you can see the content on your own terms. The cross-realm and phasing systems smooth out the lag caused by too many players in one place at one time, so you should never really have to wait for quest mobs or suffer significant input lag due to too many players being in the same spot. But the trade-off is that you hardly see anyone out in the world anymore, and servers mean almost nothing. In Classic, if you started stealing loot from people in dungeons or just generally acted like a pleb, you will get branded. Your name will get passed around. Everybody will know who the trolls are, who the ninjas are, who the tryhards are, who the amazing players are. Server reputation will actually mean something when you're locked to playing with just the people on your server. Classic WoW has no dungeon finder. It has no raid finder. There's not even a decent group finder. There's no cross-realm play, no sharding, no phasing. All of these features that have provided us with more efficient ways to play the game will be gone. But at the end of the day, you're trading convenience away in Classic World of Warcraft. That's going to be a great thing for some people, but for others, it could be a complete deal breaker. You also shouldn't play Classic WoW if you don't like the idea of a reset. This is going to be a completely different account, a completely different set of characters. Nothing that you do in Classic will trade over to your retail account. Nothing from your current retail account will be available on Classic. Mounts won't trade over, pets won't trade over, transmog, gold, other currencies, reputation. Nothing. You're starting fresh, just like everyone else, but that's also kind of like starting a new WoW account up. I know a lot of players have huge sentimental bonds with their WoW accounts and characters. So much time has been poured into this game, so it's perfectly understandable. Personally, I think it's really exciting that we'll see a full reset. New expansions are always my favourite time in World of Warcraft because we get a soft reset. Everyone is reset to an even playing field. We have to level up and gear up from scratch. We have to get reps from scratch, new mounts, new pets, all that good stuff. Everyone is on the same page for the new expansion. But it's not a true reset. Gold, mounts, gear, collectibles, anything from previous expansions that you continue forward, everything is still there. Obviously, I don't want that stuff to reset every expansion, that would be crazy, but I like the idea of Classic being a full reset. I think it's really exciting. no one will have any gold, so the only gold in the community and on the server will come from actual sources. Mobs dropping gold, chests dropping gold, that kind of thing. You can't just make gold farming materials because no one else has any gold to actually spend on your materials. I think it's going to be super fun because the last time we had a true reset for retail WoW was the very start of vanilla. Anyone who has had gold since the very start has kept that gold throughout the expansions, so I love the idea of a reset. I can't wait to see how it all pans out, but I could totally understand how starting all over again could put a lot of people off of Classic WoW. If you're still with us, congratulations! Classic might just be the right game for you. Let's have a chat about some of the reasons why you should play Classic World of Warcraft. This first one's a bit of a doozy. Nostalgia. It gets all of us the itch to return to something we once enjoyed. I know RuneScape is a big nostalgia tug for a lot of people because it was one of their first adventures in an online world. Old school RuneScape is also going pretty strong, which can cause that nostalgia bug to get even bigger. I hope Classic can do as well as old school RuneScape has, and go even further, because the nostalgia tug from Classic might be one of the biggest nostalgia draws I can really think of. The sheer number of players who called this world home for at least some part of their lives is amazing. Hearing that first version is opening up again could bring back an absurd number of players. I know I've spoken to my brother-in-law about coming back to WoW several times over several expansions, and the answer is always the same. Not really interested right now, but you should have seen his face when I told him about Classic WoW. I didn't even have to convince him that much, he got himself hyped up after he knew what was coming. I know it's not all nostalgia though. I had a blast playing the Classic beta, and I personally thought I was going to be done after an hour or two. I sunk way more into that beta than I thought I was going to, and that's just a beta. It doesn't even mean anything yet, but nostalgia is a powerful driving force. I bet a huge percentage of players are going to check out Classic based on their nostalgia alone, and that's perfectly fine. If you had a good time in Vanilla WoW, or even in the earlier expansions of World of Warcraft, you should totally give Classic a shot. Now, even if you didn't play during Vanilla, that doesn't mean Classic won't have anything for you. As I said, it's not all nostalgia. You should play Classic WoW if you're just curious how the game played back then. It can't really be as hard as everyone says, right? It surely doesn't take me 10 casts of Frostbolt to kill an enemy, right? No sir, it doesn't, because 5 casts of Frostbolt makes you go oom. I'm kidding, that's only at the early levels. As I've explained in some of the previous points, Classic WoW is a very, very different game when compared to Battle for Azeroth. I almost wouldn't even want to compare them directly because they're so different, but those differences are why a lot of players are so excited. If you haven't been able to experience Vanilla for yourself, whether that's because you weren't playing back then, you were too young, you couldn't afford the monthly sub, or you were just too busy playing other games, or actually doing things in real life if that's a thing, then now is a great time to hop into Classic and see what all the fuss is about. If you don't like it, no harm done, but you might find Classic to be just to your liking. You won't really know unless you try it out for yourself. We talked about farming and grinding earlier, but seriously, if you love a good grind, you have to check out Classic WoW. Everything works differently. It's not a simple case of joining a queue, smashing through a dungeon and hoping for a piece of loot. Everything is more involved in Classic. You have to get the group together. If you don't have guildies or friends online, that means barking in trade or general chat, or even in yells for your last few party members. Then you have to get over to the dungeon. On foot. I hope you all know where the dungeons are, or at least have a handy map ready on your second monitor. A second monitor's technically cheating in Classic. I don't know anyone who had a second monitor back then. I'm going to go ahead and call it cheating. So you make it to a dungeon, now you have to go pack by pack, making sure you don't pull too much, make good use of CC, and get through all the bosses. A few party members should get some loot, but by this point in time you've probably spent close to an hour. A far cry from the 10-minute AoE fests that Battle for Azeroth dungeons are. That's not even really grinding or farming, that's just a single dungeon. The rest of the game requires you to farm and grind, but the real key here is that you're consistently rewarded for your time and effort. You can't just skip over huge sections of gearing up if you get lucky. There's no Warforging or Titan Forging. You have a very specific gearing up path for a lot of Classic Classic WoW. It's just going to take a bit longer is all. So Classic is definitely slower progress, but more meaningful rewards. That goes for pretty much every aspect of the game. It takes longer to achieve, but it's going to be worth it in the end. Whether that's leveling up in general, getting your first mount and eventually getting your epic mount, gearing up at level 60, starting to raid, or just taking part in PvP. There's some super prestigious rewards on offer, but it's going to take you a while to get them. So if you like the idea of slow progress but more meaningful rewards, Classic is going to be the game for you. And then you can never forget the community aspect. I do think this is going to be quite different than how it was back in the day, because we are very different people and we're all interconnected so much better than we were when vanilla was the only World of Warcraft available. So it's not going to be the same community aspect as vanilla. I think that would be naive to think it would be. I think it's going to be close. It could be even better. We now have huge names in the community with a lot of pull. Some of the events that streamers set up, like the massive Alliance vs Horde Arathi Highland Brawls, were super awesome to watch and take part in. Getting that kind of thing organised back in vanilla would have taken a long time. Streamers can just do it in a couple days. As those big names keep playing Classic, you can be sure that at least something will be happening in-game. On a more personal level, we talked about everything that has been added for the sake of convenience a bit earlier. All of that is gone. That means your server reputation actually means something again. Your server actually means something again. You can't rely on anyone else on other servers, so you better make a good name for yourself so people know you're the chap they can turn to if they need some blacksmithing done, or if they need a tank for whatever dungeon or raid they're looking at running. Whether it's the dude who has all the crafting recipes, or the lass who knows where every little secret is, or the warrior tank who is practically a god. You can make a name for yourself on your server, and that kind of reputation will stick. No random queues means you have to make your own groups. No cross-round play means you're stuck with the same set of players. It's going to be really interesting to see how everything pans out, and I really wonder how closely Blizzard will be watching the development of Classic. If this becomes a huge hit, the old way to do things, what will they think about retail WoW? Will they look back and wonder how many mistakes they've made, where they made the big ones, and how could that influence the future of retail WoW? I think that's fascinating, but either way you look at it, there should be more of a community aspect in Classic than we have right now in BFA. There's almost no way to avoid it. If you're hungry for some community, hop on the Classic train right away. And then the last reason in this video you should play World of Warcraft Classic, because it's practically free. You don't have to buy an expansion or anything like that, and if you're already subscribed to WoW to play through BFA, Classic is included in that very same subscription. You gain access to both retail and Classic servers with a single subscription, so if you're already subbed, why wouldn't you play Classic? You should play a little bit at the very least. There's almost no excuse to let this pass by without giving it a fair shot. If you had to pay separately, or if you had to buy a standalone game, I could totally understand people not wanting to fork over the extra moolah to be able to play an old version of the game. But it's included in your sub. As I said, it's practically free, so do yourself a favour and poke your toe into the pool. Yes, it takes longer to get anything done. Yes, it's more unforgiving when it comes to difficulty and knowing what you're doing. Yes, you have to actually read the quest text sometimes, but all of that is part of the magic. Personally, I will definitely be playing Classic WoW, or actually set up on Fairlina, which seems to be where every other content creator is for NA, so that's going to be fun. I'm going to kind of play it by ear and see how everything goes. It's going to be a lot more fun if more people are joining in, and I know our guild already has quite a few players ready to go on August 28th, so that should be a blast. I'll probably make it to 60, I might not raid consistently depending on how many of us actually get to endgame, but I'll give Classic a fair shot for sure. I guess one last little point to add is that if you're interested in any other Classic versions of expansions, or just interested in Classic being added onto one day, you should give this first project as much time as you have. The only way future Classic expansions or any development time for them will be considered is if this first project does well. Chip in what you can to make sure it succeeds. If you're still not sure, the Classic beta did just open up again, and I think it's running until Friday the 16th. That gives you a few more days to hop in, see what all the fuss is about, and make a decision of whether or not you'll be sitting down to play Classic World of Warcraft with us on August 28th. But that's it for this video. Are you going to play Classic World of Warcraft? Is there any major factor that's swaying you one way or another? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.